Hey guys, tonight we're wandering through the kind of palace that shouldn't exist outside of dreams, or nightmares, depending on how you feel about candlelight and secrets. Imagine this: moonlight spilling across white marble courtyards, the air heavy with the scent of jasmine and burning sandalwood, and you, just a quiet observer, moving through the perfumed dark. You probably won't survive this, not because of anything dramatic, but because sleep is already leaning over your shoulder, ready to pull you under. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The palace is older than your country, probably. Its walls have seen more whispered conspiracies than any court historian could record without getting executed. The queen, our queen, let's call her Anara for now, moves through these halls as if she's both prisoner and goddess. Her bangles make no sound. Her silk robes are a soft storm trailing behind her. You trail behind too, ghost-like, keeping your distance. Every few steps, she pauses near the lotus lamps, those golden bowls of flame that float in still pools, and stares at her reflection. Maybe she's counting her regrets. Maybe she's remembering his face, the one she's not supposed to remember. It starts with letters, as it always does. The first one she writes on parchment smuggled from the royal scribes. You can smell the ink before she even begins. It's thick and black, mixed with crushed charcoal and rosewater. Her handwriting is deliberate, as though each curve of the letter could be used as evidence against her. "If I write," she whispers, "I still exist." Her voice trembles like wind through chimes. You almost want to tell her to stop, to burn the paper before the paper burns her. But she keeps going. Queens don't stop halfway through confessions, even when their lives depend on silence. Outside, the courtyard hums with night creatures. A pair of guards trade stories near the gate, one laughing too loud for the hour. The Queen's guard, however, is quiet, always quiet. His name is lost to history, though some say it was Daran. Others claim he never existed at all, just a phantom of rumor and pity. Historians still argue whether such a man served under her reign at all, or whether he's a later invention, romantic propaganda for a tragic empire. But here, in this soft dark, he's real. He waits beneath her balcony, where the air smells faintly of rain and copper. He doesn't look up, not even once. He knows that love in a palace is a dangerous habit, like breathing too loudly. When she finishes writing, she folds the letter, seals it with melted wax, and presses the imprint of her ring, a crescent moon cradling a single tear-shaped gem. Then, without ceremony, she tosses it over the railing. It lands at his feet. You watch his hands tremble as he picks it up. He hides it beneath his armor, close to the skin. That's how all tragedies start, with one heartbeat too close to another. Inside her chambers, a clock you can't see ticks against the silence. Time in palaces like this moves differently. It stretches and folds like silk. You might fall asleep listening to her breathing. You might wake up centuries later and find the same moon still watching. A quirk of old palace architecture. Some rooms were built with hollow floors, a secret network for messengers and maids. You can almost hear the shuffling beneath the tiles, faint whispers in the stone. Maybe that's how her letters travel, sliding through the veins of the palace like forbidden blood. By dawn, the queen sits by her mirror again. Her eyes are red, but not from tears. No queen ever cries where servants can see. She dabs her lips with rose water, paints her brows, ties her hair high. You can sense she's preparing not for morning court, but for a kind of performance. One where her face must hide everything her letters reveal. Out in the corridor, Duran walks past her door, helmet on, eyes straight ahead. He doesn't glance sideways, doesn't breathe differently, but as his armor catches the morning light, you see something. A faint trace of ink smeared near the collar. The same ink she used. If anyone else noticed, he'd be executed before breakfast. The palace itself feels complicit. The marble reflects too much. The fountains murmur like gossiping courtiers. Even the peacocks seem judgmental, strutting past with jeweled feathers that catch and scatter the light like secrets. There's a rumor among the servants, a story you overhear as you drift through the kitchen courtyard. They say the queen's chambers smell of jasmine because she burns the letters she receives. Others claim she grinds them into powder and mixes it with her perfume, so that when the king kisses her hand, he's breathing in another man's words. Absurd, right? But this is how history survives, through absurdities that no one dares to verify. By evening, the queen returns to the balcony. You're there again, watching her silhouette framed by the moon. She leans on the railing, her expression unreadable, her fingers tracing patterns in the dust. Then she begins another letter, slower this time, her script looping like a sigh. The moon hides me, but cannot hide my heart. Somewhere below, a soldier listens to the same moon. He's supposed to be guarding the gates, but instead he's memorizing every word he'll never be allowed to read aloud. You follow her through the next few nights, quiet as breath, soft as regret. The letters multiply. Some are short, like prayers. Others stretch for pages, filled with thoughts that shouldn't exist in royal ink. You never see her smile, but you can tell she does, privately, when she folds the paper. There's a power in secrecy. It makes ordinary things sacred, like a whisper or a stolen glance. But it also builds walls thicker than stone. Once while she writes, a moth lands near the flame. It flutters too close, and the edge of the parchment catches fire. She extinguishes it with her bare hand, leaving a small burn between her fingers. She stares at it for a long time, as if understanding that this love, like that burn, will leave a mark no one else can see. Historians still argue whether this part ever happened, of course. Some say the letters were fabricated centuries later to make her reign more human. But if you could stand here, as you do now, watching her hand tremble over the page, you'd know it's too vivid to be invented. As the section closes, the queen finishes her latest letter. She doesn't throw it over the railing this time. She holds it to her lips, then tucks it beneath the lotus lamp. The flame flickers in response, as if acknowledging her. In the courtyard below, Daron looks up for the first time. Their eyes meet through the curtain of night. No words, no gestures, just a shared breath that feels like treason. And in that suspended moment, you understand. Love in this palace isn't a gift. It's a ghost waiting to be discovered. You stand beneath the queen's balcony again, though this time the night feels heavier, as if the air itself knows what's about to unfold. The moon has drifted lower, pale and watchful, and the sound of water trickling from the courtyard fountain has slowed to something almost human, a kind of sighing rhythm that matches the pulse you can't quite ignore. Somewhere above, the queen's chamber windows glow faintly. Behind those draped silks, she's writing again. You can almost see her silhouette bending forward, her hand moving steadily across the parchment. And below, the soldier, Darren, waits. He doesn't look up right away. He's careful now. The last letter nearly cost him his life when the captain found a wax seal tucked inside his armor. He lied, of course, said it was from a temple priest, some forgotten family blessing. The captain hadn't believed him, but kings always need loyal men more than suspicious ones. You watch as the queen leans over the balcony and drops something, a ribbon this time, tied neatly around a folded note. It flutters downward like a petal, and Darren catches it without glancing up, sliding it beneath his gauntlet. For a second, you swear he smiles. He walks away slowly, boots whispering over the flagstones. You follow at a distance, through the maze of corridors and courtyards, past servants carrying trays of pomegranate wine and guards changing shifts. The palace after midnight is a strange place. It never truly sleeps. Somewhere, someone is always awake, polishing, plotting, pretending not to see what they just saw. He reaches the stables. The smell of hay and horse sweat mixes with the sweetness of her perfume still clinging to the letter. He lights a small lantern, opens the note carefully, and reads. "They will never understand," it says, "how silence can speak." He stares at the words for a long time, his lips moving as if trying to memorize them. Then he folds the letter and hides it beneath the lining of his saddle, between two old stitches. He's done this before. You can tell by the precision of it. Somewhere in that saddle are half a dozen of her words, hidden like fragile bones. Historians still argue whether this soldier, this Darren, ever truly existed. Some claim his name was invented by later poets. Others insist palace archives once listed a guard dismissed for insubordination and misplaced loyalties. Either way, someone carried her letters. Someone risked everything for the weight of her ink. Back in her chambers, the queen kneels by her dressing mirror. She looks almost calm tonight, though the faint bruise beneath her eyes betrays exhaustion. You can hear distant laughter from the king's hall, a reminder that her husband still lives, still rules, still demands appearances. On her vanity lies a new letter, half written. You drift closer. She writes, "If I must burn, let it be in truth." There's no tremor in her hand now. The earlier fear has settled into something deeper, resignation, maybe, Love, after all, is only terrifying when you still think you can escape it. She folds the page, tucks it inside a silver hair comb, and sets it among her ornaments. A clever trick. The letter's paper is so thin it looks like part of the comb's inner lining. Tomorrow she'll hand it to a maid who, accidentally, drops it near the stables. The palace is a theater, and every servant plays a role. By morning, the corridors are alive again. The queen moves through them with her usual serenity, the air around her thick with perfume and tension. Darren passes her once, escorting the vizier. They don't exchange a glance. They never do. But the silence between them feels louder than the court musicians rehearsing in the garden. You linger in the background, blending with the bustle. A scholar recites an old poem near the fountain, something about swans and exile. The courtiers pretend to listen, but they're watching the queen's every movement. Her gestures are small rebellions now. The way she refuses to look at the king, the way she lingers near windows, as if longing for the open world beyond. The queen is proud, one whisper goes. The queen is bored, another counters. But you've seen her letters. You know she was simply alive. And that was the real crime. That evening, rain arrives. Not a storm, just a slow, patient drizzle that soaks the courtyards and fills the lotus pools with ripples. You walk under the covered arcade, watching droplets slide down stone pillars. The queen stands at the far end, alone, her veil damp, her bare feet leaving faint prints on the marble. Darren appears again, stepping from the shadows. This time, they speak. You can't hear the words, but you can see the shape of them, the rise and fall of her lips, the way his head lowers slightly, reverently. He takes her hand briefly. Just that, a touch shorter than a breath, softer than a lie. Then he steps back and vanishes into the rain. If anyone saw them, they'd both be dead by dawn. But the night keeps their secret, wrapping it in the hush of falling water. Later, in her chambers, she writes again, this time not with ink, but with soot scraped from the edge of her lamp. The letters look rough, uneven. Do you ever dream of being ordinary? She writes. It's such a small question, but it carries centuries of longing. You think about it, too, how history only remembers crowns, not the hearts that wore them. A flicker of movement catches your eye. One of her ladies-in-waiting enters without knocking. She's young, nervous. You can almost hear her thoughts. The queen should not be writing at this hour. But Inara just smiles. She says, it helps me sleep. The maid curtsies, backs away. The moment she's gone, the queen exhales shakily. Even queens lie when love demands it. The next morning brings trouble. The king's astrologer, an old man with eyes like dried figs, announces that a bad omen has entered the palace. A comet was seen above the moon, he says. The king nods gravely, as if this cosmic visitor somehow explains his wife's distance. You notice how Darren listens nearby, motionless, hand on his sword hilt. His eyes flick briefly toward the queen, just once. She doesn't move, doesn't react, but later, when the court disperses, she pauses by a tapestry and slips a folded petal behind it. You know what that means. Another message,
another risk. The walls are closing in, and she knows it. Still, she can't stop. Love has a gravity of its own, pulling even royalty toward disaster. Days pass. The letters continue. You see fewer smiles, more caution. The queen starts burning the wax seals immediately after each letter leaves her hands. Darren stops wearing his armor near the stables too, obvious a hiding place now. He starts using the temple courtyard instead, slipping the pages beneath prayer mats, trusting that no one would desecrate a holy place in search of a woman's heart. And yet, rumors grow. Servants whisper about missing ink bottles, about a soldier who looks too long at the moon. The captain of the guard orders nightly searches. One evening, they come close, too close. You hear boots echoing in the hallway outside the queen's chamber, hear the muffled question, "Why does her perfume smell like smoke?" She sits perfectly still, the fresh letter cooling beneath her sleeve. The guards move on. When dawn finally breaks, she doesn't write. She just sits by the window, staring at the river below the palace walls. You can almost feel her thoughts drifting like the mist on that water. If you could ask her, she might say she's not afraid of being caught. She's afraid of being forgotten. Because one day, long after this palace crumbles, someone will find her letters. They'll read her words and wonder who she loved and whether it was worth it. Historians still argue about that too, whether love ever justifies the ruin it causes. But you, standing here in the quiet aftermath of rain, know what she'd say. Yes, because for a few nights, I was real.
You're still in the palace, though the scent has changed. The sweetness of jasmine and rose is fading, replaced by the faint, acrid smell of smoke. It lingers in the corridors, like a ghost that refuses to leave. The queen hasn't written in days, not because she stopped feeling, but because too many eyes have started watching. The ladies in waiting whisper about new orders. The king's temper has grown short, they say. He's begun questioning servants, dismissing some without cause. Even the peacocks in the courtyard, once her favorite, have been moved to another wing. Everything that glitters is now a potential spy. And yet, tonight, as the moon creeps up again, you find her at her writing table. She moves carefully, every motion rehearsed. The candlelight dances over her rings, and the ink glistens like spilled secrets. She's writing on a smaller piece of paper this time, thin, fragile, easy to hide. "If I vanish, let these words remember me," she writes. The sentence feels final, too deliberate. You feel it too, the way the air thickens when fate starts tightening its grip. She folds the paper, not with wax this time, but with silk thread. Then she reaches up, pulls a golden hairpin from her braid, and slides the letter into its hollow shaft. It's so subtle you'd never notice it, even standing a breath away. She pins it back in place, her expression calm. You almost want to applaud the audacity. The next morning, she walks through the garden, every step precise. Darren waits by the gate, pretending to inspect the guards. He barely glances at her as she passes, but his eyes flicker briefly to the pin glinting in her hair. That's all it takes, a signal, invisible to everyone else. Later that night, he'll find that same pin on the statue of the moon goddess near the reflecting pool, and he'll know what it means. Historians still argue whether this method of message hiding, letters concealed in ornaments, was ever real or merely a courtly legend. A fragment of a hollow pin was in fact excavated from beneath what's believed to be the queen's quarters centuries later, but no paper survived inside. Still, the story persists, and maybe that's all that matters. As the days pass, the palace becomes a net tightening around them both. The king begins to suspect something, though no one dares to say the word betrayal. Instead, courtiers whisper about omens and unrest. The astrologer claims the moon's alignment warns of a woman's deception. It's safer that way, to let the heavens accuse her instead of men. One evening, you find her pacing her room, restless. She's holding another letter, this one stained with a single drop of ink shaped almost like a tear. They call it sin, but if love can defy a king, perhaps it's divine. She smiles faintly, not out of happiness, but out of irony. Queens learn to laugh at tragedy long before it arrives. Then she hides the letter beneath the base of a small statue, a dancing peacock carved from jade. You wonder how many letters now lie scattered throughout the palace, disguised as decoration. The palace itself has become her diary. That night, you follow Darren as he moves through the shadows, silent as always. He retrieves the hairpin from the statue, then another message from the garden well, sealed inside a clay bead. The lengths they go to for a few words, it almost feels holy. He reads by lamplight in his quarters, though his hands shake. The letter is brief. The walls are listening. Burn this after you've read it. He doesn't burn it right away. You can tell. He reads it again, lips barely moving. Then he sets it aflame, watching the ash scatter across his table. A faint smile touches his face. Love, you think, is the most beautiful form of foolishness. The next day, the queen attends the royal feast. She sits beside the king, her face serene, her voice sweet. You can see how carefully she performs the role, how each smile feels rehearsed. Darren stands among the guards, expression blank, eyes fixed forward. At one point, a minstrel begins singing a new ballad about a queen and her secret lover. The court laughs uneasily. The king doesn't. His gaze lingers on his wife a heartbeat too long. For the rest of the evening, no one breathes too loudly. When the feast ends, she returns to her chambers in silence. The corridors are lined with mirrors, hundreds of them. She catches her reflection again and again until she no longer recognizes herself. She sits down and begins to write again. The candlelight flickers as if hesitant to illuminate this next confession. They'll remember my crown, but not my heart, so I will bury it where even time forgets. This one isn't for Darren. This one is for herself. A few days later, the queen's maid is caught near the stables with a folded piece of paper. You hear the shouting before you see the torches. She swears she found it on the ground. She swears she didn't read it. But the captain of the guard doesn't care. The maid is dragged away. Her screams echo briefly.
then stop. The queen says nothing. She can't. But that night, she kneels by the lotus map, her face lit by its trembling flame. She doesn't cry. She just stares into the fire and whispers something too soft to catch. You think it might be his name. The next day, new orders spread. All letters are to be inspected before leaving the palace. Servants are searched. Even the queen's writing desk is checked under the pretense of restoring order. She watches silently as they rifle through her drawers, lift her quills, test the ink pots. But they don't find the secret compartment beneath the table's edge, the one carved for hiding a handful of folded dreams. After they leave, she sits again. Her hand hovers above the parchment, hesitant now. We are both trapped, but at least we're trapped together beneath the same moon. She doesn't seal it this time, just folds it once and places it beside the lamp. Outside, thunder rumbles. The monsoon season is coming early. The air feels electric, tense, as if the world itself is holding its breath. You wander through the palace corridors later that night, the lamps flickering low. Somewhere, you hear voices, men speaking in urgent tones. The words treason and infidelity slip through the air like blades. You follow the sound to the council chamber, where the king sits in shadow. Someone lays a piece of parchment before him. You can't see the writing, but you recognize the seal, the crescent moon. The king's hand clenches. The parchment catches fire in the brazier beside him. The flames curl upward, bright and merciless. In another part of the palace, the queen looks up suddenly, sensing something burning that isn't just paper. The next morning, she finds her writing table moved, her candles replaced. A warning. She says nothing, but when you look closely, her eyes are sharper now, resigned, not broken. She stands at the window, watching the sunrise. The courtyard below glows orange and gold, beautiful and cruel. You imagine Darren down there, still waiting, still believing. The queen lifts her hand, tracing invisible words against the glass. I will write again, even if it must be in ashes, she promises. You believe her. You have to, because the story isn't over yet. The night of the burning courtyard begins quietly, too quietly. The air feels thick, like the palace itself is holding its breath. The queen sits near her window, ink drying on her fingers, her last letter still damp beside her. Outside, the torches burn low, their flames flickering uncertainly against the gathering wind. You can tell she feels it too, that prickle at the edge of her awareness, that shift in the atmosphere before everything changes. She's dressed not in her royal silks, but in a simple white robe, as though preparing for something she already knows she can't avoid. Down below, Darren moves among the guards, his expression unreadable. You can almost sense his pulse, fast and unsteady beneath the armor. He's heard rumors. Someone betrayed them. Someone spoke of the letters. Historians still argue who it was. Some say the maid who survived her beating confessed under torture. Others claim a jealous scribe stumbled upon one of the hidden messages while replacing the queen's inkpot. A few, more romantically inclined, insists the king himself had long known, waiting only for proof. But no one ever found the original letter that sealed their fate, if it even survived the flames that were about to come. The queen stands by her writing table one last time. The lotus lamp trembles as a gust of wind snakes through the room, scattering petals across the floor. She gathers her letters, the few that remain unburned, and binds them with the same silk ribbon she once used to send her first secret message. If they find these, let them see not a crime, but a confession of being human. Her voice is calm, almost eerily so. You could almost believe she's relieved that the waiting is over. Then somewhere in the distance, a shout cuts through the night. Boots thunder across the courtyard. The sound multiplies, echoing off stone. You rush to the balcony and see torches moving fast, like veins of fire racing through the palace's body. Darin appears below, pushing through the chaos. His sword is drawn, not for battle, but for desperation. He looks up, searching for her face among the shadows. The queen steps out into the open air, her hair unbound. For a heartbeat, the world holds still. The moon, the torches, even the night wind pausing to watch what comes next. Then the gates crash open. Guards flood the courtyard. You can hear the king shouting somewhere beyond the chaos, his voice thick with betrayal and rage. The smell of smoke hits first. Acrid, unstoppable. Someone has set fire to the archives, perhaps to destroy the evidence, perhaps to destroy everything. Darin runs toward the queen's wing, cutting through the confusion. Flames crawl along the drapes, licking at the painted ceilings. You follow him, though your feet feel heavy, your heart beats slow, like a dream tipping toward nightmare. When he reaches her chamber, the door is already half ajar, smoke curling through the gap. The queen stands inside, clutching the bundle of letters to her chest. Her eyes meet his. No fear now, only clarity. "Take them," she says. "If anything survives, let it be the truth." He shakes his head. "If I take them, they'll kill us both." "They will anyway," she replies. The flames reach the doorway, a glowing border between them. He steps through without hesitation. For the first time, they stand close enough to touch, and you realize this is the moment history always forgets, the one that isn't written in any chronicle or legend. He takes her hand, just once, just long enough to remember it. Then he pulls her toward the balcony. Below, the courtyard blazes. The lotus pools have turned black with ash. The peacocks scream, wings flailing through the smoke. The guards shout orders, but no one listens anymore. The palace is no longer a kingdom. It's a burning confession. Darin runs toward the queen's wing, cutting through the confusion. Flames crawl along the drapes, licking at the painted ceilings. You follow him, though your feet feel heavy, your heart beats slow, like a dream tipping toward nightmare. When he reaches her chamber, the door is already half ajar, smoke curling through the gap. The queen stands inside, clutching the bundle of letters to her chest. Her eyes meet his. No fear now, only clarity. "Give me one letter," he says. "Just one." She hesitates, then slips the smallest parchment from the bundle and presses it into his hand. This one was never meant to be read, but maybe it will find its way home. You want to ask her what it means, but the roar of the fire swallows everything. He hides the letter in his armor, then he turns to face the door as the king's soldiers burst in. What happens next depends on which historian you ask. Some say Daran fought them until he was cut down beside her. Others claim he surrendered, was dragged away, and executed at dawn. A few ancient scrolls hint that he escaped into the mountains, carrying her final letter, though no proof was ever found. What you do know is this: when the flames finally died, the queen's chamber was a ruin. The marble cracked from the heat, the curtains gone, the air still thick with smoke and silence. The king declared her death an accident. The court poets were forbidden to speak her name. Her portraits were removed, her servants reassigned. The palace continued as before, but something essential had turned to ash. Weeks later, scavengers searching for the ruins of the lower courtyard found fragments, small, blackened scraps of parchment fused to melted wax. A single phrase was still legible: "The moon hides me." That's all that remained of her midnight letters. And yet somehow the story survived. It whispered through generations, crossing borders, slipping into songs, finding new shapes each time. Historians still argue whether it began in truth or in myth, whether the queen's letters ever existed outside imagination. But the more you listen, the more the silence feels deliberate, as if history itself is conspiring to protect her secret. You wander through what's left of the courtyard now. The tiles are cracked, the fountains dry. The smell of smoke still clings to the stone, even centuries later. And in that lingering ash, you imagine their shadows, her standing at the balcony, him waiting below, two silhouettes caught forever between fire and moonlight. The palace, once the heart of the empire, is just bones now, columns and echoes, yet somehow the air still tastes faintly of ink and jasmine. Maybe the letters weren't destroyed after all. Maybe the words just moved into the stones, whispering themselves to anyone who listens closely enough. You close your eyes and think you can hear them. If I vanish, let these words remember me. And they do, even now.
Centuries have passed since the night the palace burned, and yet the story refuses to fade. You stand now at what remains of the river palace, a mosaic of ruins buried beneath vines and moonlight. The courtyards are silent except for the hum of crickets, and the air carries that faint, ghostly perfume of jasmine again, as though time itself remembers what the world tried to forget. The locals call this place the Queen's Breath. They say that on certain nights, when the moon lies low and the air turns silver, the scent returns, not from flowers, but from memory. No garden grows here anymore, only stones, shadows, and whispers. You walk through the shattered archways where her footsteps once echoed. Every wall feels like a half-remembered letter. Each crack in the marble holds a line of poetry the fire couldn't erase. And if you listen long enough, you'll hear it, a soft rustle like parchment turning in the dark. The first archaeologist to excavate these ruins was an English woman named Eleanor Hayes, who arrived 200 years after the Queen's disappearance. In her journals, she described a haunting stillness, as if the stones were waiting to speak. She unearthed fragments of burned lacquer boxes, melted glass, and something stranger, thin flakes of metal inscribed with characters so delicate they could only have been edged by royal hands. Most of the inscriptions were unreadable, but one fragment bore a faint mark, a crescent moon cradling a lotus. Eleanor noted that symbol appeared nowhere else in the kingdom's recorded art. It wasn't a royal emblem, not a religious sign. It was personal. She wrote in her diary, "I believe this mark belonged to the Queen herself, perhaps the seal of her private letters. Whoever she was, she wrote not for power, but for love, and the Empire could not forgive that." As decades passed, the legend of the Queen who waited by moonlight grew more intricate. In one version, Darin escaped the fire and wandered across the desert, carrying her final letter until he vanished near the coast. In another, he never existed at all. The Queen's lover was imagined, a ghost of longing she invented to survive her isolation. A poet from the northern provinces reimagined her as a symbol of rebellion, the woman who loved too fiercely for a throne built on obedience. A historian from the south argued she was a cautionary tale, proof that even the highest born must bow to the weight of duty. And somewhere in between those interpretations lies the truth, too quiet for history to write, too human for legend to capture. You wander into what was once her chamber. The walls are scorched and pitted, the roof long gone. Only a single arch remains intact, framing the river like a memory refusing to erode. Beneath that arch, archaeologists discovered something Eleanor never found. Buried beneath layers of silt and dust was a bronze box, sealed, unmarked, untouched by the flames. Inside were scrolls wrapped in silk so fragile they turned to dust at the slightest touch. But one survived. It was a single page, preserved between plates of beaten gold. The handwriting was unmistakably royal, elegant, precise, steady even as the world around her fell apart. The message was short, just a few lines. "If love is a crime, then let my sentence be memory. If I am forgotten, let the rivers speak for me. And if my words survive the fire, let them find him." No name, no date, only that faint scent of lotus oil pressed into the paper, still lingering after all those centuries. You stand there, holding the replica in your hands, and the river below begins to shimmer under the moonlight. It looks alive,
ripples moving like ink across parchment. You realize that this is what she must have seen on her final night. The same moon, the same water, the same reflection of herself dissolving into something larger, quieter, eternal. It's said that on nights like this, travelers who sleep near the river dream of her palace not as ruins, but as it once was. Glittering halls, mirrored floors, the scent of jasmine thick in the air. They dream of her walking through those halls, barefoot, her letters in hand, her eyes turned toward the moon. In those dreams, she isn't afraid, she isn't weeping, she's simply waiting, calm, certain, as if she knows that love, once written, never really dies. And maybe that's why the story endures, because it isn't just about a queen or her forbidden love. It's about the stubbornness of feeling, the refusal of the heart to be erased by duty, fire, or time. Every age retells her story differently, but the melody remains the same. It's a song about a woman who chose to be remembered for love instead of power. About a man who carried her words through a world that wanted to silence them. About letters that burned but still spoke through ash. You think about how fragile everything is: ink, paper, flesh, memory, yet how some things persist, like moonlight on water. And as you stand there, you understand the real secret of her letters. They were never meant to be found. They were meant to keep the world listening. Some nights, when the moon hangs full above the river, locals still leave folded scraps of paper near the ruins. Not prayers, exactly, more like confessions, apologies, words they could never say aloud. And every morning, without fail, the papers are gone. No one knows who takes them. Some say the wind. Some say the queen still reads. So you turn to leave, your footsteps echoing softly through the ruins. The moonlight spills across the stones like spilled ink, and for a moment you almost see her again, standing by the arch, her face half in shadow, half in light. Her eyes meet yours, not with sorrow, but with recognition. Then she fades, leaving behind nothing but the sound of water and the scent of jasmine. You close your notebook, realizing you've been holding your breath this whole time. Maybe history didn't forget her after all. Maybe it just changed the shape of her voice. You whisper her final line into the quiet night. If love is a crime, then let my sentence be memory. And the river answers, soft, steady, endless. The next morning arrives like a sigh over the ruins. Mist drifts low across the river, softening every edge, and the palace seems to exhale, its stones finally resting after centuries of remembering. You stand there, wrapped in the hush between night and dawn, tracing the line where the water meets the broken walls. Somewhere beneath your feet lies the final letter. It was discovered just 5 years ago, during the last phase of excavation, a sealed compartment beneath the queen's marble bed.
The chamber had been filled with ash and soil, but when the archaeologists pried open the hidden niche, they found something astonishing. A narrow bronze cylinder, sealed with wax and wrapped in the faded remnant of royal silk. Inside was a letter, folded 3 times, sealed again with the same crescent and lotus emblem found on the earlier fragment. It had never been sent. The handwriting is different this time, shakier. The kind of writing that happens when the body is exhausted, but the heart refuses to stop speaking. It begins simply, "To the one who will never read this." You can almost hear her whisper those words as you read them, her voice trembling in candlelight. She writes of the fire, the chaos, the betrayal she saw coming but chose to ignore. She describes the soldiers who once swore loyalty, now turning their blades toward the palace. But she doesn't curse them. She doesn't even blame them. Every kingdom, she writes, is built upon the bones of stories. Some must burn so others can be told. You pause there, realizing how strange it is that even in her last moments, she thought of memory more than vengeance. She goes on to describe Duran, how he tried to reach her chamber through the smoke, how she saw his silhouette in the courtyard before the flames consumed everything. "He ran through fire for me," she wrote, "and I could not follow." That's the part where your throat tightens, because in the rhythm of her writing, you can tell she didn't fear death. She feared silence. She feared her love becoming a secret too heavy for time to carry. "So if my letters never reach him," she writes, "let them drift to the edge of the world, and let the wind decide where love should rest." Historians still argue whether the letter was truly hers. Some claim the wax seal was added centuries later. Others say the writing doesn't perfectly match earlier samples. But there's one detail no one can dispute: the scent. When the archaeologists opened the tube, the air filled instantly with the fragrance of lotus and smoke, as if the moment had been waiting, perfectly preserved to breathe again. That scent lingered for days. Even after the letter was taken to the Capitol Museum, visitors swore they could still smell it on their clothes after leaving the exhibit. It's strange, isn't it? How something invisible can last longer than the person who made it? How scent can outlive language? Now the letter rests behind glass, in a climate-controlled room where even the light is filtered to keep it safe. School children press their faces to the display case, reading the translation etched below in bronze. "To the one who will never read this, I forgive the fire. I forgive the silence. I forgive time." And below that, her final line: "Love is the only kingdom that never falls." No signature, no royal crest, just that crescent and lotus seal, faint as a sigh. You sit down on the stone near the riverbank and watch the reflection of dawn spread through the mist. The palace glows faintly, like an ember remembering what it once was. And you start to wonder, maybe her love story wasn't lost at all. Maybe it became part of the land, the water, the air. Maybe that's what love does. It rewrites history not in ink, but in everything that remains afterward. A heron glides across the water, its wings leaving ripples that stretch toward the far shore. You imagine one of those ripples carrying her letter, finally reaching wherever Duran's spirit might be waiting. That thought feels strangely comforting, like closing a book whose story will never really end. You breathe in the quiet. If you listen closely, the palace doesn't sound empty anymore. It hums with all the lives that pass through it, all the voices that dared to whisper after midnight. You can almost hear her scratch of her pen, the rustle of silk, the heartbeat that echoed between the walls before the fire came. And you realize something? Every time someone remembers her story, every time a voice repeats her words, she writes another letter, one not sealed in bronze, but carried in breath, sound, and dream. Maybe tonight, she's writing through you. And now, as the river grows still beneath the moon, let everything slow. Let your breath match the rhythm of the water. Inhale the quiet, exhale the weight of the story. The Queen's letters have traveled far enough, through fire, through memory, through the spaces between what was lost and what remained. You can imagine her now, at peace, sitting beside the river she once watched from her window. The palace rebuilt in dreamlight, her ink no longer trembling. Darren by her side, or maybe not, it doesn't matter anymore. The story has stopped needing proof. You let the night drift over you like the silk she once wrapped her letters in. The air feels cool against your skin. The scent of lotus fades, replaced by something simpler. Rain, earth, the sound of your own heartbeat. There's no fire now, no throne, no crown, only quiet, only water folding back into water. The Queen's words dissolve into sleep, soft, lingering, unafraid. And as your eyes grow heavy, remember, love doesn't vanish in the ashes. It lingers, patient and eternal, waiting for someone just like you to listen again. Good night.